Well, hello neighbors. Welcome to 2018. This will be actually my first show since the new year began, and I wanted to shoot a show, actually a result of a comment from one of my viewers, and it's going to be about grains and how the flavors of grains carry through to the whiskeys we love. So we'll get into that and all of these lovely bottles after the break. Okay, well, welcome back. Yeah, I think it was Nicholas Pontello or Pontanello. Sorry, I should have written the name down in front of me. Who commented on one of my shows about just asking the question: how does the grain used to create whiskey affect the flavor profile of the whiskey? That's a great question, and there are actually so many factors that go into making this lovely drink we enjoy. But a key characteristic absolutely would be the grain involved. So I thought I'd take a few bottles that I think are a good representation of that grain and talk a bit about it. So the first up is barley. Barley is, all scotches are made from 100% barley. To be a scotch, you have to have 100% barley in your mash, and then your distillate and so on. It has to be aged in Scotland for a minimum of 3 years. So I looked at what I had on the shelf that might be a good representation of, I want to say a simple scotch. And by that I mean, as I looked, actually it was hard to find because most of my scotch has, it's peated or it's aged in a cask that imparts a lot of flavor, like it's aged in ex-cherry or ex-rum or who knows, ice wine, but I wanted to find a scotch that was, made from barley and aged only in ex-bourbon casks to try to get a very clean flavor profile for the grain. So Glenmorangie is a good example of that. They age up to, this is 10 years, and then they often finish in other casks beyond that. But before I nose and taste that, you'll notice I went down to the local bulk store and I got flowers from each of the representational grains and wanted to see if there was a smell difference or a taste difference. I mean, of course, on the nose, it's funny, you're used to nosing whiskey, and then you bring a vial of flour up to your nose. Well, maybe it smells like we're going to bake something here together. But, barley flour, pretty mild. Yeah, and as it has a little more of it, kind of nutty. Yeah. Kind of nice. I can't really smell lots from it though. But then the question is, how much of that makes it on to the final result? There truly are so many factors in looking at the flavor profile of a whiskey. You can't really hang everything on one thing. But certainly using only barley affects the way scotch tastes. If I give this nose, give it a smell. This is a pretty light scotch. This scotch has, maybe some sweet grass, a little bit of pear, sweetness towards honey. That natural earthy sweetnesses. Actually quite nice on the nose. Being a scotch, it's not overly sweet in the mouth. You get a little bit of wood tannin and bitterness, but it's pleasant. It's what you're looking for in a scotch. This is actually, I need to shoot a review of Glenmorangie so you can get my fuller feel for it, but it's quite a nice scotch. It's a great entrance scotch, and in this comparison, I think it is a good, solid representation of a barley profile. It's a little bit nutty, but not overwhelming. There's some bitterness in there, but not crazy. Super balanced, this spirit, and pretty nice. Next spirit I want to highlight is corn. I actually spent quite a bit of time looking for a spirit that would be 100% corn. I was able to find 100% like a moonshine, which probably would be a better representation of just, hey, what does corn taste like with no aging or anything? But it was a little expensive, and I wasn't quite convinced I wanted a whole bottle of that. So instead, the spirit that I think really represents corn very well, it would be bourbon, right? To be a bourbon, it has to be aged in America. It has to be a minimum 51% corn in the mash bill. I've chosen Buffalo Trace because for this distillery, I think it's their mash bill number 1, which I believe is 10% or less than 10% rye. So, I should say for mash bills, if you're just tuning into whiskey, kind of new at it, when Americans typically brew their spirit, they will mix the grains that they want together during the fermentation process. So this is mostly corn, but it also has some rye and it also has some barley in it, and they'll ferment that together and then distill it and cask it, age it in new oak, as opposed to used oak. So I chose this one because of the high corn. So I think in keeping with what I just started, this is some corn flour. Give it a taste. I think we normally butter corn or sweeten corn. But this flour, tastes a little bit like popcorn. If you're eating a dry corn or something like that, it's kind of what it tastes like. Actually, the longer it stays in my mouth, it's actually a little bit sweet. I'll clean it out. And now try a bit of Buffalo Trace. Just a dramatically different nose. This is what I would say many bourbons would characterize. It's sweet, full, rich. There's a little bit of astringency here. This is a younger bourbon. And there's a little bit of spice in here. Not typical of corn. We'll get to that in a minute. Yeah, there's a fair amount going on in here. But staying with the theme of this show, it is rich in the mouth, coating, quite sweet. Quite sweet. There's more in this, right? There is a little bit of spice in here. Definitely the oaky notes are there. There's a lot more in it than just corn. But if I'm thinking of what does it bring that wasn't present in the barley, it would be a higher sweetness. I know corn actually gives higher alcohol per unit of grain, so it's another reason why it's often a favorite in moonshine and whatnot. But richer, buttery, sweeter, I think those are all good things that corn brings. Moving on, I'm going to go to wheat. So I've got Bernheim Original Wheat Whiskey. This was a special cask pick from, what's that marketplace in Calgary? I'm closer to Edmonton, but, the Kensington Wine Market in Calgary. Really good store. But before I give that a taste and nose, let's try the flour, see if there's anything different. Well, okay. Now this is totally baking bread. It smells like white, unbleached, unenriched flour. Maybe I should have started with this. Less taste is how I might describe that compared to the other flours. But let's see how the spirit tastes. I don't like this bottle in front of me. So this is, it's actually a little bit floral on the nose. Definitely sweet, but not quite as sweet. Sorry to go back here. It's close to as sweet as that, which talks a little bit about the mash bill in this Bernheim wheat whiskey. To be a wheat whiskey, it has to be 51% wheat. So it's a lot of wheat, but I'm pretty sure the balance is corn. And on the nose, it's probably what I'm getting. But this is a softer spirit. This is a gentler, a little thinner, not as coating. The sweetness is a different type of sweetness than I was getting from the Buffalo Trace. Oh yeah, certainly on retaste. Yeah, this is, if I was drinking this just alone on a night, I think I would describe it as sweet. But comparing it back to the corn whiskey, it's just not as sweet. It's definitely more subtle, more soft. Sweetness more towards honey. I know I was picking that up in the barley. But there's a lot of grains in here, so it's tough to describe wheat. This one, I would say, just seems softer, just seems quieter. Perhaps that's what wheat adds. Last one on the list here is rye. If you watch the show at all, you know I like rye. So this is lot 40 from Harriman Walker. And I guess starting with the flour. Not much nose on this flour. I expected something a little different, because this one also tastes a bit nutty again. So that's interesting. I wonder if that's percentage of the husk that's in these flours. Anyways, so rye, this one is a little nutty. But let's see what the spirit. Lot 40 is 100% rye. This one is the older 2012 edition, so there's a little bit of malted, a little bit of unmalted rye in here. But I picked this as, for me, this is a great rye profile. It's immediately floral and fruity, dark fruits, plums or aged fruits, the kind of the leather on the skin. Yeah, right away. And, while there is sweetness in there, I like the sweetness. It is, you could say overtaken. I won't quite say overtaken, but the spicy, peppery, the feel on the edge of your tongue really is more pronounced, more prominent. I would even say in the finish, there's wood characteristic across all of these. This one might be a little more bitter than any of the ones here as well. But with the little bit of, with that floral and that, especially if you're, drinking a rye and you've still got all of that going on in the nose, all the floral notes and the fruits, and then you've got a little bit of that bitter finish. It's drying on the mouth, quite a bit more drying on the mouth than all of these. Quite enjoyable. So I like rye, but that would be its flavor profile. I guess I'll push it out here to keep it in the original order. So we went through each of these grains, and I tried to give you a little bit of a sense of what these particular spirits taste like, but talk a bit about more what their grains add, because there's so much in each of these bottles that also result from cask, aging, selection, and other factors. But in general, I would say barley, not that sweet, little bit nutty maybe. Nice bitterness, not overpowering. Corn, quite sweet, buttery coating in the mouthfeel. Wheat, definitely subtle. It's actually tough to pick up the characteristic of wheat in a spirit. I think it does add a little bit of honey, a little bit of the cereal notes to it. And then rye, definitely spicy, peppery, drying, a little bit bitter. And I think all of these kind of speak to why, like in the U.S., their spirits are made by a mash bill. They mix the grain to try to get the characteristics that they want. In Canada, I don't have a Canadian whiskey out here. Well, Lot 40 is Canadian. They blend after aging, but again, they're trying to look for that balance of what they want to try to get out of what they taste in their corn whiskey and maybe a wheat whiskey. And a lot of times rye is really added just to give it that little spice. So anyways, I hope you liked sort of my walk through the different grains of whiskey, the different grains that make the whiskeys that we enjoy. Post your comments below. Give me a thought. See if I got something wrong or if I mispronounced anything. I really thank Nicholas for that comment. I think it's a great one, and I hope this generates a little bit of discussion. I want to just end with one quick thing. I focused on grains and their flavor profile, but certainly how you cask it can dramatically change the flavor. And that's because I started by saying I looked a long time for 100% corn, ended with a bourbon because I think it gives corn its due. I actually have 100% corn whiskey. You wouldn't know it because it says Mount Logan 20-year-old Canadian rye whiskey, but I've done some research on this, and this is 100% corn. But when you taste it, it's a nice whiskey, actually. It's got a lot of that spice, a lot of that not burn, but a lot of things you look for in rye. So obviously the way that they have aged it has affected its flavor. So I didn't use it as my example of corn because it's really almost hiding that it's a corn whiskey. Same with a whiskey that I enjoyed and reviewed earlier, this Last Mountain Distillery. This is a 5 or 6 year old wheat whiskey, and I like it. And up front, I think it does taste like a wheat. You can kind of play in that subtle sweetness, a little bit of bready, but it also finishes spicy, very much like a rye, and so I didn't want to use it as an example. But I brought it up at the end. If you've stayed this long, you're clearly interested in whiskey, just to say I've given a sense of what each of these grains bring to the whiskey table, but truly, the people that know what they're doing when they age, they choose the casks, or blending after, they choose how things have aged, can really decide the flavor profile of the whiskey that we eventually bring home. Hey, John, the Whiskey Neighbor here. Thanks so much for joining me. Thank you for all the new subscribers that happened over the Christmas break. It's just phenomenal, and I love reading your comments, and I really appreciate it. So if you have any other questions you'd like me to tackle or answer, please let me know, and feel free to share the video or subscribe if you haven't already. Take care.